of Faithbook Friday and the month of May. So over the months of May and June, Lord willing, because we are expecting a grandbaby sometime in the next 6 weeks or so, we will be going through Proverbs 31. And we're not going through it verse by verse, but I kind of got this thought that maybe Proverbs 31 doesn't just apply to women, although it's called the wife of noble character. Now, this proverb was written by a mother to her son. It says to King Lemuel, thinks that his mother taught him. But in researching this, I found that this was possibly taught to Hebrew children as a standard for when they were choosing a maid. It could have been something that they actually memorized in order to know what characteristics to look for in a mate. And I was referred back to Proverbs 20, verse 6 by one of the commentaries. And when you look at Proverbs 20, verse 6, it says, "Many claim to have unfailing love, but a faithful person who can find." So some scholars think that although this was written to find a wife of noble character, this should be applied to both men and women. And in looking at everything, I kept thinking, these are be attitudes. These are things that we should be in order to live a godly life. Now, if you'll remember in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus taught a sermon, and we call them the Beatitudes, where he taught about qualities and attitudes that are valued in heaven. Well, the same is true for Proverbs 31. These are attitudes and qualities that make us more Christ-like to the world around us. And so we're going to explore them in that way. Now, I've just got my little sheet ready, and I'll show you what I'm doing as I go through it. But I want us to go through each week and talk about one of these be attitudes related to what Proverbs 31 says about it, and then related to a Bible character, sometimes a lesser known Bible character, or one that's not talked about quite as frequently. So our first be attitude is be a blessing to others. And we find this in Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 12, and then 17 and 23. And in verses 10 through 12, it says, "A wife of noble character who can find." We might say a person of noble character who can find. "She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value." And then in verse 12, "She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life." And then let's skip down to verse 17. "She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task." And then in verse 23, "Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land." So in this be attitude, we find that it's important that we be a blessing to other people. And we do that by having a noble character, by bringing good things, not harm, to our family, by doing our jobs in a way that the people in our family have full confidence in us, they don't lack value. And because of the jobs that we do, the way that we act, our family members are respected. They're not talked about badly, because what we do brings a blessing to them and not a curse to them. It helps them to be the best they can be at their job. Now, I'm going to put this on a 4x4 card, because I'm going to be putting all these into little peekaboo pockets, 4x4 peekaboo pockets. So this will be the front of my card. And then when I flip it, it's going to tell you who we're talking about today. And we're going to be talking about Esther. Now, keep in mind, our main point is to be a blessing to others. We're looking in the book of Esther. That's in the Old Testament. It is after Nehemiah and before Job. So the book of Esther tells us a lot about two different people who were a big blessing in the family of God. And I'm not going to read the whole the whole book to you, but I want us to look first in chapter 2. And it tells us about Xerxes. He was the king. He gave a banquet. Vashti refused to come like he wanted her to. So King Xerxes decided he was going to look for a new queen. He was not happy with the way Vashti had kind of shut him down. So in Esther chapter 2, verse 5, "Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiachin, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So first in this, we see that Mordecai was a blessing. He brought Esther in to live in his household, to take care of her, to provide for her. And he was a blessing to Esther because he acted as her parent. And then looking on chapter 2, verse 15, when the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So here we find that Esther had become a blessing. She became a blessing to the servants. She followed their advice. She listened to them. And it says that she won the favor of everyone who saw her. You don't become a blessing to other people by being a mean person. You become a blessing to others when you listen to their advice, you consider their feelings, you take into account their thoughts and actions. And it says the king was attracted to her and she won his favor and approval. So she became a blessing to the king. She did something in the way that made the king favor her over the others. And I only have to assume that that was related to her actions and her attitudes, perhaps her kindness. But she was able to make everybody love her because she became a blessing to them. Now looking in chapter 2, verse 20, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. Now, if you have children, I just want you to know this verse spoke volumes to me because this tells me that Esther was a blessing to Mordecai. Not only was he a blessing to her as he had raised her, but it says that she had followed his instructions just as she had done when he was bringing her up. If you have a child who is tenderhearted, who has obeyed, who has done the things they're supposed to do, that is a blessing. It really is. It's a blessing from God. And so Esther was a blessing to Mordecai, even growing up as a child, and she continued to follow his advice even when she was in the kingdom, in the palace. So in Esther chapter 2:22, but Mordecai found out about a plot. This is the plot where Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers, were conspiring to assassinate him. Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles, and this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. So Esther and Mordecai became a major blessing to the king. They actually spared his life by finding out about a plot and letting him know about that plot. Now going on into chapter 4, we're skipping several things, but in chapter 4, we find that Mordecai is all upset because of this edict Haman has had issued to destroy the Jews. Mordecai's upset. He's in sackcloth and ashes. He's weeping and wailing. Esther's a little concerned about him, so she sends one of the servants out to talk to him. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the golden scepter to them and spares their life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. So as a background here, Mordecai has told Esther, it's really your job to go and talk to the king to spare our people. If you don't go and talk to him, we have no hope. But the law said if someone approached the king without being summoned, they could immediately be put to death. That was the king's prerogative. And Esther's concerned because Xerxes has not called for her in 30 days. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. So Esther realized at this point that she had an opportunity to be a blessing to her people, to be a blessing to the Jewish people. And she realized that she was going to have to rely on God. Now, God's name is not even mentioned in the whole book of Esther, but she's called them to fast for her during that time so that they can decide what they need to do and that they can do it wisely. We realize that she's leaning on God, although his name is not mentioned. But she is trying to discern a way to become a blessing to the people that are here, the Jews that are here. And carrying on in chapter 9, in 9 verse 29, now during all this time, she's held a feast with the king. She approached the king. The king allowed her to live. He told her he would give her whatever she wanted, up to half the kingdom. And she tells them that Haman has done this evil thing and he has made this edict and all the Jews are going to get killed, and she's a Jew. And she is able to write a new edict telling the Jews that they can fight back against the people when they come to kill them, against the people of Susa when they come to kill them. It's been a hard time, but the Jews triumph in that. And King Xerxes is able to give her the authority to make this happen. So in chapter 9, verse 29, it says, "So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of Xerxes' kingdom, words of goodwill and assurance, to establish these days of Purim at their designated time, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had decreed for them, and as they had established for themselves and their descendants in regards to their times of fasting and lamentations. Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, and it was written down in the records." So what are these situations with Purim? What is that? And that is a Jewish holiday, and I don't know a lot about it. Purim, I'm not sure even exactly how it's pronounced, but we learned earlier that the Jews were able to fight back against the people of Susa when they came to carry out their edict to kill all the Jews. And then Esther asked the king to allow them again to do that the next day as well. So on the 13th and 14th day of that month, the Jews were able to fight back against the people who came to kill them. And then on the 15th day, they rested. And it says the Jews in Susa had assembled on the 13th and 14th. Then on the 15th, they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. That is why rural Jews, those living in villages, observed the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. Carrying on in verse 20 of chapter 9, Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy, and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as a day of feasting and joy, and giving presents of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. Now, when I think about Esther, and I think about what a blessing that she and Mordecai were to others, they basically saved the whole Jewish nation because of their obedience to God and because of their obedience in working with each other. They had to deal with a pagan king, Xerxes, Esther was the queen for this pagan king, but they were able to still follow what God had commanded their people to do, and they were still able to preserve the Jewish line. So, in being a blessing, I have to say, not many of us are ever going to be in a position where we have the ear of the king so we can preserve a whole nation. But there are always things that we're called to do. And in your printables, I put this verse, which is probably one of the most famous verses from the book of Esther. And this is a sort of a paraphrase from it. It's in Esther 4:14. And in my version of the Bible, it says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." I think that's beautiful. Sometimes when we remain silent, we are not a blessing to other people. We allow other people to be hurt, to be bullied, to be ostracized when we remain silent. But we need to be reminded that perhaps this is the moment for which you have been created. There are times in our families, in our workplaces, with our children, with other people, that we are called to say something in a kind way. We are called to behave in a certain way. We are called to be an example. And I just have to think that we may never know what moments we were created for, but I'm in full belief that God puts us in certain places at certain times to have an impact on the world around us. So today I want to leave you with this be attitude. We want to be a blessing to others, and we need to think about that in light of where we are, what we're doing, who we're interacting with. Perhaps this is the moment for which you have been created. And remember, every page tells his story.